Hello everybody and welcome to Multiple Factors Knockdown Flat. I'm Matteo Scarlata. This is some joint research with Matilda, Backendal and Miro. So at USENIX last year, MFKDF was presented. That is Multi-Factor Key Derivation Function for fast, flexible, secure and practical key management. What MFKDF promises is something very nice and interesting. So, what if we could derive keys not just from our passwords, but also from other authentication factors that we have with us, such as YubiKeys or TOTP codes? Why is this an interesting promise? Well, usually when we need a key in settings like end-to-end encrypted cloud storage or for password manager, we just derive it from a password using PBKDF or password-based key derivation. Why is this a problem? Well, because a lot of bad things can happen to our static password. For instance, humans may be very bad at picking the static password to begin with. Maybe you picked a good static password, but then you reused it on some other service, and then it ended up on some giant data breach. Or even worse, maybe you were sitting at a security conference and typing it on your laptop, and somebody on the row behind you saw it. Or maybe even your keyboard was compromised. And so in all of these cases, a static password does not help us protect against an attacker, and that's why for authentication, we use one-time code. So for instance, time-based one-time passwords, or TOTP, are a very common second factor of authentication. We can use them combined with our passwords. So even if our password was very weak or was leaked, as long as the attacker doesn't get our current OTP, they cannot access to our web services. And it doesn't matter that I'm showing here to you a screenshot of my Google Authenticator with all my OTPs, because by the time you try to use them, they will already have expired. These are codes that change every 30 seconds. So maybe now you can see why the promise of MFKDF is interesting, because it would allow us to achieve this same kind of one-time security for key derivation. So the first part of this equation is already clear. So MFKDF can just reuse PBKDFs for going from the static password to a key. But what about the bottom part? How do we combine a dynamic TOTP with a static password to derive key? After all, this bottom part is not static, so it's a ever-changing code. And we need to find a way to go from this ever-changing code to a static key. So the way MFKDF solved this problem is using what they dub a TOTP construction. Now, how does MFKDF implement this TOTP construction? Where they start by picking a random target. This is a 6-digit number. This target is what will be later used to actually derive cryptographic key material. And then MFKDF lists all of the possible, or a long subset of possible future one-time codes. So you can imagine taking the next month worth of one-time codes, and then we sum them with the target modulo, and we obtain code offsets. So why do we do this? Because then when we want to derive and then we take this code offset and we save them in a public state that we can store on server. Then when we want to derive our target again, well, what we do is we look at our public state, we fetch it back from the server, take the code's offset out, and then look at our authenticator for the current one-time code. Now, since we know that the current one-time code and the current time, so we can pick the right offset, sum it back again, modulo 10 to the number of digits that we're using for TOTP, and get our target back. So fantastic, right? This is how MFKDF goes from a dynamic code back to a static target. But does this actually give us what we wanted to start with? So this is where our research started, and where, like me, Matilda, and Miro started looking at this and felt like there was something wrong. What we wanted was combining a static password with a dynamic factor that is ever-changing. But what is actually happening here is that when we also consider the public state, we combine the public state with the dynamic TOTP, what we get, again, is just a static target, static 6-digit code that then gets combined with our password to obtain a cryptographic key. And this is a problem because if we have a public state, if we fetch this public state and recover the code offsets, then we don't just need the current one-time code to recover the target, but actually any of the one-time codes will work. Any of the one-time codes, whether it's the current one, an old and expired one, as long as we sum them with the corresponding offset, they will all recover the same target. So to carry out an attack on these dynamic factor constructions, we just need to access the public state. And this is easy by definition because the state is supposed to be public, contain no secret. And in the demo of MFKDF built by Nair, this is just a post request away. And then we need any one-time code. So now it's no longer fine if I show you a screenshot of my Google Authenticator, or if you look at my Google Authenticator while I have it open and I'm sitting in front of you in the conference. This is not a problem just for the TOTP construction presented in MFKDF. It's a problem actually for all of their dynamic factor construction. So whether you use TOTP, HOTP, or YubiKey, all of the factor gets transformed into some sort of static string, and then all of this static secret are used for key derivation. So now suddenly we have no protection at all in case of shoulder surfing or keyloggers. MFKDF proposed to replace PBKDF2 and other password-based key derivation function because they can take in more inputs and have these more advanced security properties. But actually, if we look at it in the light of our dynamic factor attack, we can see that at best, MFKDF with a TOTP factor of 6 digits is as good as plain PBKDF with a password that is just longer and where we append a static 6-digit string. With the difference being that at least now we know that this 6-digit string is secret and constant, and if somebody sees it, it's gone. Like it no longer will make the password, our password, more secure. We have no illusion that this will be a one-time code. And actually, even considering this, is MFKDF at least as strong as PBKDF with a longer password? Well, we actually have found more attack. You remember the HOTP construction that I showed just before? Well, the authors claim that this construction achieves information theoretical security. This is because supposedly taking a 6-digit random number, the one-time code, and summing it to another 6-digit random number, the target, will lead to some unpredictable 6-digit random number that leaks nothing. That is actually not the case. As it turns out, one-time codes are not uniformly random. They're biased. This means that if we take a lot of one-time codes and then study them, like we can see a bias in their distribution. This is not enough to exploit for authentication, but it is enough, in our case, to see another bias in the distribution of the offsets. And so giving just offsets, enough of them, and no code at all, eventually we will be able to recover the target. So there is a trick here. I said eventually because we actually need quite a lot of offsets to carry out this attack in practice. 10 to the 9 offsets. This is like a few hundreds of years worth of offsets, but still. If you want a more practical attack, well, I can offer you some. So let's look at MFKDF with a static password, then a TOTP, then a YubiKey. So we have 3 factors in this MFKDF. And now let's say that I managed to get hold of the phone running the TOTP, and I managed to get to the Google Authenticator export screen. So now we have an export of all the keys inside of the authenticator. Well, if I take these keys together with the public state, I can entirely bypass all of the other factors and go straight to the key. This is due to some errors in the cryptography in how MFKDF is specified and implemented. So if you want to know more about how this attack works and about all the other attacks that we found against MFKDF, I invite you to take a look at our paper. As you can see, we found a lot of attacks, but only one of them can actually not be fixed. The dynamic factor attack is a fundamental issue, and we believe we cannot use authentication factors at all for key derivation. We're currently working on other constructions that harden password derivation using second factors, but we want to use purposely built second factors for this and not to recycle existing HOTPs or YubiKeys. With this, thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to take your questions.